different this time around, so I wasn't sure what was going on. But for those that are coming in, my name is Lorna Baez, and I'm one of the assistant directors here at the Small Business Development Center. While I give a short introduction, Kiomara is going to be, she's sharing the screen. I want to make sure that you're able to see the screen. So in the chat, can you just give me like a yes? We're able to see Kiomara's presentation. This presentation is going to be how to conduct an employee verification form. So specifically the I-9 form. I will be, let me, one moment, they just told me that the chat feature is disabled. So let me enable it for everybody. Okay, check now to see if you're able to use the chat. Yay, thank you so much. You see, we're getting there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next slide. Basically, I wanted to let you know that the way that we share our information, which includes workshops, face-to-face workshops, online webinars like this one, also important grants for small businesses, is through our newsletter. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. Once we get this recording, we will be sending you the recording, the presentation, and also important documents that Kiomara has shared with me. I'll be sending those to you. Give me like 2 to 3 business days until we get the recording from the FIU Zoom department, okay? When you register with the newsletter, you're going to get important updates from us, so please subscribe. One of the important updates that I wanted to let you all know, if there are any food entrepreneurs here on the call, we do have a Santander grant that is specific for food entrepreneurs. This grant closes on July 8th. We will be sending information about this, so please sign up for the newsletter so that you can get more information about this grant. Also, next slide, Kiomara. Something else that I wanted you all to know is to follow us in social media. So our Instagram, our LinkedIn, we're always posting about grants, resources, community partners that also have important workshops and webinars for you, small business owners here. But also like our business consulting services. This is a first series, so it is 2 webinars. Kiomara is going to be doing this one specifically on the I-9 audit form. But then on July 29th, we're going to have a second webinar that is going to be how to attract, hire, and retain employees. So we're also going to put that information on the chat. In today's chat, we have our student assistant, Andresa, who's going to be helping us. If you have any questions, please, you can use the Q&A session, and at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up, okay? So I wanted to introduce Kiomara, the SBDC at FIU. So we're the Small Business Development Center. We help small businesses in Miami-Dade and Monroe County. So these are business consulting that are individualized and at no cost to you. All of our consultants are specialists in their own area. Kiomara is our human resource specialist. She has over 20 years of experience in human resources, strategic planning, talent development, etc. And this is why she is now providing us with a wealth of knowledge in today's webinar. We really hope that this webinar is of importance to you and that it helps you. If you would like to meet Kiomara after the webinar individually for your specific business needs, please register with us in the link that Andresa just shared with you. So with no further ado, Kiomara, please take it on.
Thank you, Lorna, and good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. And I'm very happy to be discussing this subject that in today's events in terms of immigrations and employment and the events that are happening in every aspect of the business life cycle this time around, you know, this is one of the items that have become extremely important, and it's one that we feel that small businesses, you know, we want to take the opportunity to share information with you. It is a form that many times we are not even aware of, but it's one that carries a lot of importance in the employment relationship and the compliance relationship of the business. And it's one that also carries a lot of liabilities for businesses in terms of financial liability and impact. As we are all aware of the news, we see a lot of immigration rates taking place in multiple areas of the country, multiple businesses. So it is extremely important that we as business take proactive approach to this and are always ready, because the impact is not only to the individuals who are exposed to deportation or their immigration status being revoked, but also for the businesses. This form, what it is called employment verification form. And it is required for every single business in the United States. The purpose of this form is to validate that the person you are hiring is eligible for employment in the United States. The form you have specifically 3 business days to complete the form within the hire day. When you bring an employee into your organization, and you have 72 hours to complete the form. So basically, this form has 3 different sessions, which has also 3 different dates. These 3 different dates, which is the employee first date of employment, when the employee is complete session 1 of the form, the second date, which is in session 2 of the form, which is the employee actual hire date, which is the first date of employment, and the third session, which is the third date, which is when you as an employer or an authorized representative of the employer complete section 3, which is where you verified that the person have presented documents to you showing you that they are eligible for employment in the United States. And every single session have to be dated. And session 3, which is the one you complete, it has a statement that you are validating on the penalty of perjury, which is a federal felony, that you have actually verified the documents of this individual. So these are the things that when a business is subjected to an audit, this is one of the main things that they are going to be looking for. So these are where we are going to be covering some of the elements, the step. What can you do as a business to ensure that your I-9 forms are completed, that you have them for every single person, and how you conduct audits on yourself, because you know it's always better to be proactive. So the purpose of today is that we teach you how to self-audit so you remain compliant with Immigration Reform and Control Act, which is the legislation that requires employers to complete the I-9 form. So, and this is something that those audits are conducted by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE, as is widely known. So this is why this is important, that we understand what this form is, the significance of it, and why you want to ensure that you have everything that is required, because the financial penalties are very high. So what are the different forms of I-9 audits? So there are basically two forms of audits. One that is, as I have mentioned earlier, is the internal audit, which is the one you want to do on yourself, because you want to make sure that if you get audited, you have had the opportunity to review it and know where you stand in the event of a governmental audit. So the internal audit, you want to do it to get a snapshot of the I-9 status of your workforce, to make sure that you have one for every single employee, including the owners, including the leadership of the business. And this is always important that is initiated by the leadership of the business. The second form of audit is the government conducted audit. These are the ones that are usually conducted by ICE, and they can happen at any time of the year. They're usually triggered by multiple factors, typically either a complaint from a current or former employees, concerns raised to the immigration authorities, and also employers and industries that are typically known for violations. And some of those, industries like agriculture, constructions, industries where they know they're all usually employed a significant amount of immigrants. It could be also the service industry, hotels, tourism. Those are industries that employ typically a significant number of immigrants to the country. So those are targeted industry that can get audited at any time. But usually these are the typical triggers, or what used to be the norm. Nowadays, we see they could be triggered by anything, or just because they are doing any session or any particular area or any particular city. So you want to be proactive. You want to make sure that you take your precautionary actions and prepare yourself for it, to make sure that you, in a moment notice, you are ready to be able to successfully go through one of these procedures. This is not subject to employer size. Some regulations apply to different employers based on the number of employees. This is one that is not triggered by a number of employees. It could be any employer of any size. So what are some of the things that you want to look for when you are conducting an audit, and the things that you may find? One of the things you're going to be looking for are errors, missing information, things that create potential liability. And one of the things that is important in this is sometimes, we are too busy, and this process seems like, it's just an administrative process. When you're hiring somebody, you just want to make sure that the person is in and is ready to go, because you have a lot of work to do. The challenge with this is all those errors or missing information or even non-completion of the form at all can trigger potential financial liabilities, and it could be up to $10,000 per form missing, incomplete, or incorrect. So this is something that is very important to pay attention to, because it really has a heavy stick. And it's one that, again, it may just seem as a routinary process in the too administrative for the hiring procedure. And, the form is very self-explanatory in itself, but you may be surprised sometimes because we just don't follow the specific steps that the form itself asks. Then we find ourselves in technical violations. So the importance of conducting this self-audit is that you can yourself identify those mistakes and be able to do remedy as best as you can. So what are some of the things that you need to have present and organize yourself when you are conducting or you're ready to get started in doing your self-audit? You want to make sure that your employee roster is up to date. So you have a whole list of every single person that you have employed. And remember, the I-9 applies to W-2 employees. 1099 are not considered employees. It's important for those that you have your service agreement where they themselves, in one of those clauses, validate that they meet all regulatory compliance of the country, including the Immigration Reform and Control Act. So you want to ensure that, you know, it's a precautionary step to protect your business. But this applies to all your W-2 employees. Basically, you need to want to have a list of all your employees, and then you want to review, do you have a physical I-9 for every current employee? Do you have a list for every former employees? You also want to run a list of all your terminated employees for the last year. Because by law, you are still required to have an I-9 on record for all your terminated employees within a year, for a year. So basically, the record retention, 3 years for all active employees, which we always recommend you keep your I-9s for all your active employees, and 1 year after termination. And this is one that I make a lot of emphasis, especially the terminated employees, because most of the time we are too busy to do purging of files. And many times those are the ones that come back and hunt us back. So it is important that terminated employee files are purged on a timely basis. Also, be always aware of the most recent version of the I-9. You know, you can always find in the uscis.gov, which is the Homeland Security website, the most recent I-9 form. Why is this important? Because USCIS, or Department of Homeland Security, keep changing documents of eligibility. So a document that may have met in the past the requirements for employment eligibility may not longer be valid. So it is important because the form lists all the documents that are valid at the moment that you are completing the form. So this is extremely important that you always try to use the most recent version. And one of the things sometimes is like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. I don't have time for this. But also it's important that we think, what are the consequences or financial consequences of this? So that's why it's important to keep yourself updated. So in that way, if you know you have audited a section of your employees, every so often you may want to revisit. So then at least you go to whatever addition of new hires you have had since your last audit, because it can be very time consuming. You know, we are conscious of this, but it's something that we always recommend employers to have, because especially right now, one of the things that are happening, you know, yes, we see workplaces that they've been raided but that doesn't mean the employer doesn't have liabilities. And those are those financial liabilities that we discussed that can be very, very impactful to any business, to the tune that may put you out of business. So we want to make sure that we take good care of this and do our best to protect ourselves and to protect the business. Because remember, you are completing one session that says under penalty of perjury and as a federal felony that you have actually completed this process. Now, here are some of the steps that you want to follow when completing the audit. You want to gather all your I-9 forms. One of the things I recommend always to businesses as a best practice is to have all your I-9s in a binder rather than inside the employee file. And you could have it in a binder by alphabetical order if that's easier for you, or you could have it by hire date if it's easier for you. Terminated files, I do recommend that you have it by year of termination because it's easier on the purging process. The reason for this is because when you're auditing is not only simpler just to grab a binder and go through that than to pull a number of folders back and forth with all of the other documents that you have in there. But also because if you go through an audit, you only want to handle the auditor strictly what is the scope of the audit. You don't want to handle a full folder of your employees because what happens many times in many instances to employers is that they handle the whole folder and usually they end up with fines that have nothing related to the initial scope of the audit. So you don't want anybody coming and having a field day inside your employee files. So you want to restrict and limit your documents provision to exactly what is the scope of the audit. And the best way to do that is to have all your I-9s in one folder, one binder, by all of them. So in that way, it's easier for you to audit, but it's also easier for you to comply in the event that you get served an audit notice. So you also want to verify the accuracy and completeness of your I-9 forms. You want to look that all the sessions have been actually properly completed. You may be surprised the amount of files that I have audited and people don't put the dates or they leave information out and the employee leaves information out, or you have the first two sessions completed and nobody from the employer side completed session 3. It's one of the most common mistakes. Also, one of the most common mistakes is the re-verification process. What does that mean? You know, we have employees, and especially here in South Florida, it's very common that we have employees with a work permit or not a permanent resident status or U.S. citizen. These individuals' work permit tend to expire every year. So every year you have to re-verify that they have a new work permit that allows them to continue employment. If they do not bring a new work permit with a new valid date, the law requires that you immediately terminate employment, or will be considered a willful violation of the law. So it is very important that this process and steps are followed. So you want to make sure that you use this process now to identify errors, expired documents, any errors in any document that you may have completed. And one of the most common errors that we see is, for example, the paperwork required and the form tells you you may only need one document from section A, because section A, any document listed there, verifies identity and eligibility. So just one document from section A satisfies the requirements of the verification process. But if the employee doesn't have one or doesn't bring one from section A, then it has to be one from section B, which prove identity, and one from section C, which prove eligibility. What are some of the things that we find all the time? People use two from B or two from C, or they use one from every column, and those are technical errors. And those are technical findings that may lead to fines. So this is very important that we pay attention to those small details. And as you go through the process of auditing, you want to double verify now that the documentation provided are in line with what is required on every section of the form. So this is why this is very important that we are proactive with these internal audits and that we are able to identify all of these things ahead of time. So you want to get yourself organized, and this is required for every single employee, including US citizens, by the way. It doesn't matter if the person was born in the US. This process have to be done for US citizens as well. Anybody who have been employed after November 6, 1986, which is when the Immigration Reform and Control Act was passed, it is required to have that form on record. You want to gather all your physical and electronic copies to make sure that you reviewed them all. And like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that they are easily accessible to ensure the process flow for yourself, but also for an auditor. Now, you want to keep this information in mind as you go through this. When you're completing the auditing piece of section 1, this is the part that it must be completed by the employee, he or himself. There's a section for translator if the person uses a translator to assist them in this process, and that also have to be completed and disclosed. So you want to make sure that the name, date of birth, address, social security, even if you use E-Verify, you still have to complete the I-9 form. E-Verify is a great tool and it's very good to be used, but it doesn't take away the completion of the I-9 form. You still have to do it. And again, this is required for everybody, including US citizen. You want to make sure that they mark one of the 3 boxes, meaning they are a US citizen, and it asks you born or naturalized. If you are an alien, which is a green card, they have to put what is their alien registration number. Their green card number must be included by them in this session. And they need to have signed that session not later than their first date of employment, because they must comply with this session and complete it on their first date of employment. And as I mentioned, the preparer session, if they receive help completing the form, then that person also must complete the session for the preparer session. The second part of the form is the person must enter their name as he appears in section 1 of the form. their social security, their alien registration, everything that correlates to their immigration status in the country. And that's when they need to show you the documentation that they are providing to you. Whatever document they are providing to you, that name must match the name that they enter in section 1, because the document is supposed to be for the person themselves. And I know sometimes we say like, well, if it is for the employees, but also sometimes we have people who have changed name and now the name are not matching. It has to match. Whatever name they put on section 1 of the form, it has to match the documents that they are providing to you for verification in section 2. And this is what I mentioned earlier. It has to be the one from list 8, any of the documents listed there, one from B, and one from C, and the right start date. You know, sometimes, and I see this all the time. We say like, oh, let me save some time, and before the person starts, they email them all the documentation to complete ahead of time. The problem with that is, for the I-9 specifically, is that those 3 days, like I mentioned earlier, must be within 72 hours of each other. So, which is the certification date, the hire date, and the employee first date of employment. And sometimes you think, oh, well, what is the difference between hire date and a start date? Well, you know, I may send you an offer letter and say your hire day is this day, but for whatever reason, that may have changed. And you may have brought the person earlier, or they may have started later. So, and sometimes to save time, we go and process the person in the system so we can, you know, save time and not have to worry about that later on. But now you have a discrepancy and a technical finding. So this is why these little details are important, and especially with this form. There's not other forms in the employee hiring process that have the limitations and restrictions of this one. All the others, it doesn't matter. But also you gotta be careful, because if you have the I-9 inside your employee folder, and you have the I-9, okay, showing these 3 days, but now as an auditor, I'm going through all the employee file and I see all the other forms with a different date than the first date of employment, then I'm going to raise a red flag. And that may come back to haunt you. So this is why the best practice is to have all your I-9s in a binder in a separate, closed, secure area from your employee files. Oh, hold on. My mouse now is. And we disclosed earlier, they have changed some of the names now to Supplement A, Supplement B, but these were what it was called, you know, Section 1, 2, and 3. And can you guys see my screen? I see something that pop up.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, no, it's just I have something pop up in mine, and I don't know if you guys were seeing that white box that popped in mine. So basically, one of the important aspects also is that we do the re-verification on Section 3, which is for if any employee work authorization expired, including the green card. The green card, if it doesn't have expiration date, then you don't need to go back to re-verify it. But if the employee brings a green card, you know, sometimes people get those temporary green cards that are only valid for 2 years. Those must be also re-verified again. And if the person fails to bring you a new valid green card with a valid date, then the requirements of the law is that you terminate employment immediately. You also have to complete this part if the employee legally changed their names. It happens many times under many circumstances that people legally change their names. So if that is the case, then that have to be documented and recorded on Section 3 of the I-9. Because now the name, as remember I mentioned earlier, the name they put in Section 1 versus the document they provided, they have to match. But now if somebody changed their name legally, they are bringing a different document, which they have to provide you for name change, their social security card with the new name. If they have not changed their social security card to their new name, you cannot change the name of the employees in the I-9 form or your payroll system, because that will create discrepancies and the payment of Social Security will not go to the right person. Now you may have a complete different situation that affects your payroll system. So this is very important, that if somebody legally changes their name, they bring you the new documentation for re-verification of the I-9 with the new name, and also a new social security showing the name that they did legally. And here again, you go back and basically revalidates all the documents for accuracy, for dates, the date they submitted that to you. One of the best practices is not really required by law, but most employers, they make copies of the documents. The reason for that is you want to have at least show evidence that you did do your due diligence. You know, the law doesn't require you to be an immigration expert in terms of examining the validity of the documents, but it does require you that you exercise reasonableness in terms of that you at least took the proper step to the best of your judgment, determine that the documents were good and valid. So most employers, they at least make copies, but it's not a legal requirements that you do. But at least it helps to show like, no, I took the proper steps to ensure that what was presented to me, it was this, and I just, you know, I'm not an expert on immigration, but they look fairly real to me, and that's all the threshold that you have to meet in terms of showing your due diligence on that. Now, after you have conducted and gone through all your I-9 audits, you want to look identify what are the errors, and you want to start making corrections. You want to document in your audit what are some of the errors, your discrepancies that you found. Then you want to start addressing those errors by having the employee complete a new I-9 or updating the existing one, and you want to have them initial whatever they do correction, especially if you do it on the old one, because you don't want to be yourself editing or making changes to an existing document. So also when you are correcting the errors, you want to have supportive documentation of what documents you reviewed, and you want to attach copies to it because you want to make sure you have every step that you have taken properly documented. Under no circumstances ever backdate an I-9 form, because again, when they go back into your system or they may ask you for other documentation, those discrepancies will show, and now this may be considered a fraudulent activity and a felony under federal law. So you can just put the day initially, and document that, hey, this may be a technical finding and that's all it is, where they might either give you a small fine or just slap in the hand telling you, well, make sure you don't do this again. But at least it shows that you have been proactive as an employer, you found a discrepancy, and you are doing the best that you can to correct it and make sure things are okay. Also remember, you cannot correct the employee portion. It has to be the employees themselves. And these are some of the things you also want to be careful how you communicate this to the employees, because you also don't want to start giving people ideas. You want to make them, hey, we are doing this is confidential, we are doing revisions, and during this process I noticed that when you completed this form you may have left some information incomplete. Would you mind please going and complete this for me, to ensure that all of this is correct? I just want to make sure. You see, you have to be careful how you position the message, because you don't want to give people the impression, oh my God, now we have a violation, and this person may say, well, if you do something to me now, I'm going to report you, because it has happened. So it's important that we do the right thing, but also how we communicate this. And because we are discussing this for you as employers, this audience here is intended to help you as employers go through this process and manage this communication. And you want to make sure that, hey, this is confidential, but while going through some revision, I noticed you may have left this area incomplete. And that's for section 1. The re-verification process, you can come straight up saying, hey, your documents expires on this day, and you may want to do this 90 days before they do, because people take longer to get those documents. And says, please make sure that no later than this day you bring me your updated documentation, or otherwise, as required by law, I have to terminate your employment on that date. People at times will bring you a letter from USCIS that saying like, yes, the person is in process and all of this. Keep in mind that these are not acceptable for employment verification form. If you have questions sometimes in things like that, it's better that you consult your legal counsel. But those letters are not considered documents that are viable for re-verification purposes.
Kiomara,
Yeah,
I have a question that I think is pertinent to ask now.
sure.
So the question is, can you explain again the 72-hour rule for the I-9?
Yes.
And she continues, with organizations moving to all forms being filled out online and utilizing E-Verify, how far in advance should the company's representative send the offer letter and forms to fill out if the employee is starting their first day 2 days later?
Yes. So these are very good questions. So the offer letter, let's start by there, because it's what kicks all the process. You can send the offer letter even a month in advance, because the offer letter basically states, hey, welcome to our company. We are very happy to offer you position X with a salary X, and your start date will be, let's say, July 1st. And that's perfectly fine. That's your offer letter. The I-9 is completed during the onboarding process on the employee first date of employment. So it can be electronic. You can send the link the day before. Hey, you welcome to our company. Very happy to have you as part of our team. Please ensure that tomorrow when you come in, that you follow this link to complete the forms attached. And you send all your onboarding new hire paperwork. So the offer letter, what happens is many times we send the offer letter and the entire package all at once. And it's something I advise my clients of the SBDC all the time, never to do that. The reason for that is because the offer letter may be accepted, the person may change their mind, you may come back and rescind it later for whatever reason, because remember, for those employers that conduct drug tests and background, you want to put in your offer letter that they are contingent upon the person clearing the background check and drug test. So you don't want to be sending all your entire company information to somebody that may or may not clear. And your new hire paperwork is something that you want to do when the person is ready to start their job with you. At least if you want to save some time, send it the day before as a link, but you always want to do that on their first day of employment. So the 72 hours. 72 hours is actually established in the legislation that established in the Immigration Reform and Control Act. It actually says the 72 hours are when the employees sign the form, their first date of employment when they start, that they completed Section 1. Section 2, for the most part, is usually the same day as Section 1, which is the employee start date. At least you want that to be the no later that to be the same as the start date. But it's 72 hours. Let's say you send the I-9 the day before to gain some time and get them completed. The person completed it June 30th. They start July 1st. And you, as the employer, verify their document on July 2nd. That's your 72 hours. Those 3 days, which is when you verify the documents, meaning that you saw them, you have to physically see the documents. And nowadays, especially with COVID, there were some flexibility in some instances. As we know, we have now a lot of remote workers. So that brought a challenge to the I-9. So one of the things that was discussed, and I went through multiple legal updates with that, with outside counsel and information put out by USCIS, they allow the person to go to a notary to complete the employer session where they live, and a notary selected by the employer. So then that person is the one that does the verification that those documents are valid. So you see, in terms of that, but it's still the 3 days, which is Section 1, employee first date of employment. Section 2, employee actual start date with the company, meaning they start getting paid as of that's their first day they clock in. They are already starting the work with you in your company, first date of payroll. If it's easier to understand, your start date is your first date of payroll. And the third date is when you validated that the person has document to show they are eligible for employment in the US. So those are the 72-hour window. One of the things you also want to do, now you completed the audit, you found your error, so now you want to take corrective actions. You want to keep the records, the process that you did, because that's going to help you if you get audited by the government. Say, hey, the employer at least was proactive. He acted in good faith to remedy situation. You want to create a log of the corrective actions you have taken. And you want to retain your records for your I-9 forms, but also for your audit documentation for at least 3 years after the employee hire date or a year after the employee employment ends. Active employers always keep their I-9 until the person leaves. Terminated employees, you always want to make sure that once a year have passed, you shred those documents, because you do not want to keep those documents once that person have been gone for over a year. Now, these are some of the key considerations, and I'm conscious I want to leave some few minutes for questions. Conducting regular audits is something that is going to help your business correct issues, stay compliant, and avoid headaches. It's good to be transparent in terms of talking to the employees for the purpose to address, if people start talking, what are the concerns, you can clearly say these are routine processes that we just always review our records to ensure everything is in order. And if you find any errors from any particular employees, because remember, even though you ask them for confidentiality, they always talk. But you say, no, this is a routine procedure for us to ensure that everybody has completed their forms accurately. And you want to adhere to your compliance and your retention record because that's very essential for you. And it's going to save you a lot of time, money, and headaches. And you always want to ensure that you maintain documentation. Because again, if you get audited by the government, you want to show that you did what you could to ensure you are in compliance. Now, what happens if you receive a notification of an audit by ICE? The same way that you have 72 hours for those 3 days, remember we have mentioned those 72 hours, the law gives you 72 hours to comply to the notice. Meaning the moment you receive a documentation, sorry, I have allergies today. The moment you receive that notification of immigration inspection, you can acknowledge it or say, okay, and you don't need to immediately let the inspector in. You say, no, I have 72 hours, I will use my 72 hours. So that allows you time to make sure you do your last minute review. You also contact your legal counsel, especially if you know you may have challenges or some issues. You want to make sure then that you seek help and advice to do that, but you do not have to, the moment you get served that same day, even if you're pressured, you have 72 hours and the law gives you the right to say, okay, I will use my 3 days to comply with this request. Now, if you have to, one of the things you want to do is that it's always, advisable that you contact your legal counsel with once you've been served a notification of inspection. And you want to gather all the documentation because you have to provide everything within those 72 hours. That when it comes back again, where the binder is very useful, because if you have it all in one binder, it's just to grab the binder than to put together boxes and boxes of files. And obviously, you always want to ensure that you're cooperative, because then you don't want to be found in contempt and get some other felonies charges put against you. So these are some of the timelines and things that you want to do. They're not allowed to enter your private property without, the business consent. That you always want to discuss with your lawyer. Unless they have a warrant, they need to just adhere to the public area of your business. And you have the right to request that they show you the warrant if they are coming in for anything that is not being previously agreed with you. But we always recommend that the moment you are served with a notice of inspection, that you look the guidance and advice of your legal counsel. Always consider professional assistance in terms of legal, and if you are not comfortable or you are not particular knowledgeable or don't know what to do, you could always also, there are businesses out there that they specialize in conducting this audit. You could also do that, seek the help of any third party that specializes in doing this type of internal audits for objectivity purposes, or also to ensure that your documentation is accurate and proper. And I wanted to leave a lot of time, but I know there was a lot to cover, so this is the time where Any questions you may have, I'll be more than happy to assist you on the best that I can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kiomara. As a reminder, if you are not an SBDC client, I'm gonna send the request form so that you can fill it out and we are able to revise the application and provide you with community partner resources and or refer you to one of our business consultants. If you are an SBDC client and you're already working with one of our business consultants that is not Kiomara, but now you would like HR guidance, send me an email. So I know that Kiomara has shared a lot of information right now, and you might want to ask a lot of questions regarding your specific business. I am gonna write my email address right here. Send me an email. My name is Lorna Weiss, so that I can make that connection for you. As a reminder, this presentation and the recording, and also Kiomara shared with me a to-do list that we will be attaching that information all in a follow-up email. Please allow 2 to 3 business days to receive that email. This Zoom session has been recorded. We have to wait until the FIU Zoom department sends it to us. Once we receive it, we will be sharing it with everybody. And if you have any questions, please email me, email us. We are here to support you. We want you to be in compliance, so you don't have to do this alone, right? We're the Small Business Development Center at FIU, and our services are at no cost and they are confidential. And the idea is to help you grow your business.
Oh,
Bless you, Kiomara.
sorry.
No problem. It's allergy season.
Allergy season, absolutely.
So it's 12:58. So I am going to be closing the webinar, but please continue to stay in touch with us. Remember that we do have a follow-up webinar at the end of the month. We will be sending that information also on the follow-up email. It's also going to be led by Kiomara. Okay, so have a great day and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.